This program is designed and produced by the community with the support of Cogeco TV.
Hello and welcome to the next episode of Our Home with Mayor Sendzik. I'm Mayor Walter Sendzik for the City of St. Catharines, and glad that you can join us today because we have two topics that are of interest to a lot of people, and it's of interest because it's special to our community. So today we'll be talking about wine and beer, and the emergence of obviously the wine industry in Niagara has a long horizon going back many decades. And now, in the recent past, we've had the emergence of a local beer movement where craft breweries are opening up in different communities around Niagara. And you're really starting to see the emergence of the local food, local wine, local beer movement that is creating some economic opportunities. So I hope everyone has had a wonderful fall. And those of you who've seen me around the community, you'll notice that I'm without a beard, because if I were to keep my beard on, I'd have to open up my own brewery. And it just seems to go hand in hand that people with beards have breweries, as is our guest today. We are joined by John Coates, who is co-founder of the Plan B Beer Works on St. Paul Street, recently opened, and he is sporting a very good beer beard. Beer beard, say that 3 times.
It's been trimmed up.
It's been trimmed up for the show.
Yeah.
And joining John, we have Paul Speck, who is CEO, president at Henry of Pelham Estate Winery in St. Catharines, one of the oldest wineries, one of the oldest wineries now in our community, who has established not just a national brand, but an international brand that is recognized for its quality, for its breadth and depth of varietals that are made at Henry of Pelham, right from the vineyard all the way through to the bottle. And he is, with his brothers Daniel and Matt, a family estate winery that has really been on the vanguard of putting Niagara wines on the larger international map. So today we're going to be talking about the two industries, one that's been around for a while and one that's emerging. So I want to really start with you, Paul, in terms of where the industry is today and what you've seen over 20 years. Tell us a bit about the history of wine in Niagara.
Well, we've been making wine in Niagara for over 100 years. And just before Prohibition, there was quite a robust wine industry here. Prohibition came along and pretty much shut it down. And the first wine license to be opened up was in the early 70s in Enniskillen, Don Zeroldo, Carl Kaiser, and then later the Bosque family at Chateau de Charmes. And those two wineries in the 70s started, planting European grape varieties, changing, the way they made wine, and really modernized it. And then when Henry of Pelham got involved, we were part of basically a second wave that happened in the early 80s where that movement started to take off. And it's, now there's, when we started the winery, our first vintage was 1988.
88, okay.
We planted the first vineyard in 84. And there's under 10 wineries in Niagara at the time. And now there's well over 100. So it's really taken off from there, and it's actually very exciting to see.
Well, I think that's the important part from your vantage point, is that not many people can be a part of the origin of an industry and then see it to where it goes, where it's mature, getting to be mature. So if you look at the cycle of business, you go start up, and then you have sort of the adolescent phase, and then you get to the mature phase. And it seems like we're coming out of our adolescent phase and becoming more mature as an industry.
I think that's an excellent way to look at it. And I think we're just coming out of our adolescent phase. And it was very exciting in the early days because, and I think probably similar with where craft brew is right now, there was, it was highly entrepreneurial. There was a lot of experimentation being done. We didn't know really what we were doing ultimately. I mean, we had some idea and we had vision, but ultimately there was a lot of experimentation, and it took off. And now we're at a phase where it's really about focus. I mean, we know what grapes grow really well in our climate. We know what type of wines that they can grow, and now it's really about refining what Niagara wines are all about, and that to me is even more exciting because the quality, has never been better, and there's a lot of enthusiasm, not just in Canada for Niagara wines, but around the world, and that's really fueling a lot of excitement for us.
For a lot of people, because I think what you've essentially been a part of, you had to build the Niagara brand and you had to build the Henry Pelham brand at the same time.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the newer wineries, they are focused now on the quality in the bottle of their own brand or their own winery, because there was people like yourself who was involved with the Vintners Quality Alliance and who took a founding role and said, okay, not only do I have to build Henry Pelham, but I also got to build the wine industry. So the industry's gotten to a point now where it's got strong foundations, and new entrepreneurs can come in and they could focus, like a Taz can come in and focus on their brand.
Absolutely. I mean, we had no foundations. There was no wine route. There was no VQA. Even in the LCBO, when you went into the LCBO to buy wine, there wasn't even a section that separated any of the wines. It was just thrown in there. So those were all fundamentals that had to be built. And now it's really, having an appellation system, when we thought about it back in the day, we realized that every serious wine region had rules that govern making fine wine. And now that's table stakes. You have to have that. Yeah. And so it's great because, people can come in and focus on their brand because it's a lot more competitive.
Yeah.
Now that there's so many more wineries, and the LCBO is bringing in more and more wines from around the world. There's a lot of consumer interest in wines from around the world, so we have to be at the top of our game, and we can't look back. We have to look forward.
And what's interesting, sitting here with Paul, is John Coates, originally from Sherbrooke, Quebec, who has recently moved to the Niagara area, started his beer business with Mr. Beer Kit back in the day.
Yeah,
making beer for friends and family.
That's where it all started, yeah.
Then coming down here, it became a hobby, and then coming down here and then making beer for yourself and your friends and family, and then the idea to open up Plan B. It's at the origin of where Paul and his family were 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's very similar, where a lot of the startups and a lot of the craft breweries are enthusiasts, and they're craft beer enthusiasts that are starting, just scaling up and stepping up to the next level, going from home brewery to commercial brewery.
So what's the business model there? Like when you're, unlike a winery which has to have acres of vineyards and under plan, what's the business model for going from I'm going to make beer in my basement or garage to Plan B?
It's very scalable because you're just looking at volumes, increasing volumes and how to efficiently increase volumes. Eventually volumes get so large that you can't just pick them up and carry them around. You can't fit it in a cube freezer. So you have to have a little bit more fancier systems in place. But you still can run a small brewery on very minimalist approach at the same time. I'm seeing that our brewery right now is just a little 100-liter system. I'm fermenting in an array of different vessels, ranging from even as small as 60 liters all the way up to 300 liters. So the volumes and the scales are all quite small. So the business model is to really just make sure that your recipes and the beer is going to be palatable, and that the fine tuning is there, and that you're going to be able to make it on a consistent basis within a little bit larger of a space.
So tell us why you chose St. Paul Street. So for those who don't know, you opened up your location on St. Paul Street in the heart of the
Right there in the middle of it all.
rebirth
Yeah.
of a community. So why St. Paul Street?
Well, it was definitely a bit of a no-brainer based on how we were going to, how as my business partner and I decided that on the second approach that we were taking, because the original approach was actually Plan A, which was down in Pelham. The idea of running a space down in Pelham was not ideal, seeing that it would have been more just a production brewery with sales to licensees. There wouldn't have been much of a retail space. There wouldn't have been much of a space for the for the public to come into. But looking at overhead on startup at such a small scale, it was a building that was already within the family, and not having to have a lease really kind of cuts down overhead initially. But as we're approaching that on that one down in Pelham, it was becoming more and more complex because it is in a rural area, and it didn't have city sewer lines. So wastewater treatments were taking something that would have had a very small overhead and handcuffing us to an extremely small volume and a much larger capital investment on startup than what we had projected. And then, of course, it's downtown St. Catharines. If you want to have people come into your space, you want to have access to the locals. You want to be in a space that is where everybody wants to be. And right now, downtown St. Catharines is the place where everybody wants to be.
All right, we won't tell Pelham that. We'll keep that one quiet. But for everyone else, come on down to St. Paul. What's been the reception like since you've been open?
It's been fantastic. People are so enthusiastic. They're extremely happy that we're there. They're excited on the beers that we're making. And we're right in between the Meridian Center and the Performing Arts Center, which we're right smack in the middle between those two. So
what's your most popular beer so far?
The most popular one is actually the stout.
The stout.
Yeah, the darker beer, but it's just a low percentage alcohol, 4%. It's a light enough of a stout that you can still enjoy it on a warm day, especially like the July that we just had. But it's a nice little beer to enjoy.
And what's unique about your place, John, is that you actually can, right there. You have for a descriptive of the audience, a canning machine.
Yeah, it's like,
that allows you to can up.
Yeah, it's like the world's smallest cannery.
Yeah.
It's me and Cayman Kettle. We both have kind of the exact same little setup there. Seeing that it's an alternative to the growler, where a lot of people know the growlers as the big glass jugs.
Yeah.
Where here it's actually it's just shy of a liter. It's a can. It can get filled right off the top, and it's seamed, so the top of the can is just put on right there in front of you,
right,
and you're good to go.
Good to go.
So it intrigues a lot of people. They're kind of curious of what's this kind of industrial-looking machine over in the corner all about, and people really like to see their cans getting made right there in front of them.
All right. Yeah. So after the break, we're going to come back with John and Paul, and we're going to talk about partnerships. We're going to talk about the support of your sectors within the community and learn a bit more about the harvest for 2016 and also some of the flavor profiles that are coming out of the craft beer sector here in Niagara. So we'll be right back. All right, and welcome back to our home with Mayor Sendzik. Today we're talking about the wine industry and the emerging craft beer sector in our community. We have Paul Speck, president of Henry Pelham Estate Winery, Family Estate Winery, and John Coates, who is co-founder of Plan B on St. Paul Street in downtown St. Catharines. And they were talking about their respective businesses, and now we're going to sort of shift into a bit about the styles of beers that, John, you're looking at. And then, Paul, just want to start with you in terms of this summer was a hot summer. Like anyone, I got my electricity bill.
Yeah.
And it was through the roof. It almost forced me to open up a bottle of wine.
That's how
That's how I
a lot
was.
of rosé got
A lot of
drunk this
rosé.
year.
So what an impact would that many days of drought have on a winery like yours?
Well, we were, first of all, it was a great summer for heat and sun, but around mid-July we actually started to get a little bit worried that it was too dry. And it was one of the driest summers on record. For wineries where we're located in the Bench area, in the southwest area of St. Catharines along the escarpment, it's a clay soil and we don't have access to irrigation. So in the same way that they do in Niagara on the Lake. So the good news about the clay soil is it maintains a lot of moisture. The roots go deeper into it and they can go a little bit longer. They have access to more moisture. But I must say that in the first time in 30 years or so of us growing grapes, we actually drained a couple of ponds just to get some water out there because it was dry. That was very helpful, as well as then we did get some rains that were really critical. And so it went from a bit of a panic there to, wow, this is a fantastic harvest. And right now, it's just awesome. The quality, the ripeness, the richness in both red and white.
So both red and white.
It's not just, red will be awesome, but whites are amazing as well. And it's just the depth of flavor. When you take a bite of the berries, they're just amazing. So
you can get that sense of difference between last year and this year.
For sure. It's like, when you, like this year, peaches, I think I had the best peaches I've ever had in my life. This year. They were just so tasty. And so it's a similar experience with wine, and that translates into the wine as we go through the fermentation.
So your last harvest, ice wine obviously is the one that goes through the wintertime. What's the last varietal that comes off?
For table wines, it'll be Cabernet Sauvignon.
And when do you anticipate that?
Well, usually we're looking at the end of October, depending, maybe even early into November. But this year, I think it's all going to be done by about 10 days. Like we're thinking mid-October. We're about a week or so ahead, which is awesome.
That's great.
And sooner we can get it in, the better. Ice wine, this probably won't be the best yield year for ice wine because the grapes are going in really ripe.
Okay.
So they don't tend to do as well in the winter.
Okay.
So hopefully it gets cold soon.
No. No, I'm not going to agree with you on that.
I know. The wine guys, we're always complaining it's not warm enough, and then as soon as it's over, we have the grapes in, we want snow.
As the mayor of a city who has a lot of dollars tied up in snow removal, it's not a good idea to get a lot of snow. If it gets cold, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Not a lot of snow. John, in terms of flavor profiling, and we talked about your stout, and for those out there who are looking for the different kind of experiences on craft beer, what's some of your other flavor profiles?
Some of the ones that I have going right now for the month of October, I have a standard pale ale, which the pale ales can vary greatly from being kind of floral, citrus, spicy, based on which hop varieties that you're using in them. But usually it leads to a beer that is a bit more sessionable, one that you can actually have maybe multiple sittings of without being overwhelmed by either flavor or alcohol. And some of the others that I have going this month, I do have a black and white IPA, which is kind of a hybrid between a wheat beer based IPA.
IPA is India Pale Ale?
Yeah, it's the India Pale Ale. So the IPAs are the ones that are very hop forward. So those are the ones that, either you're going to love it or you hate it. Depends if you have a palate that's actually attuned to the bitterness and the piney citrus of a lot of hops in a beer. Seeing that you're always using the dry hopping process, which is putting more hops into the fermenter to increase the amount that comes through on the palate. And I have a smoked porter, which is actually done with a cherrywood smoked malt. So it does have that smoke flavor that carries through onto it.
So a porter is more of a...
A porter is a very... There's styles that are like a porter and a stout, are beer styles that have kind of intermingled with themselves. Initially, a stout would be a premium version of a porter, where a porter was the lower quality version of a stout. But now they're their own styles in their own respect. Usually porters are not quite as black as a stout would be.
Okay.
And they can have a lighter flavor profile, not as chewy or thick on the palate. So they're more of a lighter version of a stout, if anything.
And so what I really enjoy about listening to your descriptions, John, are how much parallel there is with the wine industry, and how when you think about beer drinking 30 years ago or 20 years ago, you think about, you had one or two brands that were always in the fridge, and it was, I'm going to say, largely mono flavor.
Yeah,
Like
it was not, won't fill you up, and it tastes like almost grainy water.
Right.
I always found it funny because they had those ads, and if you remember, they were always praising this one has no aftertaste.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was what we're supposed to be looking for, which seems counterintuitive.
It's
but
you broke
that's
it.
what they promoted.
Right. And then all of a sudden, like I think that's what I find the most intriguing is how the wine industry really created, at least in Niagara, this appreciation for the nuances between a Chardonnay, Riesling, Sauvignon Blanc, Cabernet Sauv, Cab Franc, and you can really start to separate and find your niche in terms of your own flavor that you're looking for in a wine. And then when you go to the craft beer side of it now, it's the same way. You're describing it in such taste-forward, palate-oriented flavors rather than no aftertaste.
Yeah.
So.
And won't fill you up.
And won't fill you up.
Yeah, right.
My stout will fill you up. You have one or two of those, and it's thick enough that you'll enjoy it.
Describe the experience when someone comes into Plan B. So if someone who hasn't gone down St. Paul Street in a couple months or a couple years, what's the experience going to be for them?
It would only have to be about 2 months, and I wasn't there anyway.
Right.
So as far as it's, you walk into something that almost feels like a cafe lounge, because the licensing that I have is a brewery with a retail tasting room. The idea, instead of having, because a retail tasting room is virtually my own personal beer store, but I didn't want to build it out to look like a beer store. I wanted to create a space that people are going to actually feel comfortable in and be able to actually enjoy themselves. So not having a kitchen or a menu, I didn't want to have tables and chairs, so we just have lounge chairs. So it's a very lounge cafe feel, but instead it's just the 6 beers that I always have on tap that are available there, in tasting flights as small samplers.
So you can do tasting flights. You can come in. You can do. You get like 6 samples.
Yeah,
taste them, and then
but tasting
choose
flights
3.
basically 4 samples, where
samples.
each sample is 5 ounces.
Okay.
And then there's 12-ounce glasses that you can actually order and enjoy on site. There's a couple board games kicking around. You can play a game of cards or a game of checkers or chess. And then there's the cans that you can buy for take home. Take home. Yeah.
And then Henry at Pelham, what I love about what Paul and Matt and Dan have done is that you've expanded the winery experience. It's not just about coming in and doing the tasting of the wines and the varietals, little samples. You have the Coach House.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
quickly and give a plug for the Coach House with Eric Peacock.
Well, the Coach House Cafe, we started it, oh my God, it's got to be over 10 or so years ago. And we realized that after a while, when you're on the wine route, essentially, how many tours can you do of the wineries? Because ultimately, the wineries start to look the same. It's the same process. And so this was to slow people down. There's a gap in our area in West St. Catharines for food.
Yeah.
And so you either had a really high-end experience or, it was, McDonald's and that type of stuff. So we wanted to slow people down on the wine route. So we started working with Eric Peacock and Dale Peacock, who run
on the show,
the Wellington Court Cafe. And they've been running it for over 10 years. And they do a fantastic job. It's only open during the warm season. So from it actually just closed. Thanksgiving is our last weekend, and it's lighter, more local food. It's we call it casual but elegant.
Yeah.
You're outside on a patio. We want people to have great local food without going too far over our skis, because you know, there's a lot of places you can get a nice white tablecloth at lunch.
Well, what we have is in Niagara now, we have the Ale Trail, which is anyone who's looking for the craft brews in our community. The Ale Trail, you got to check them out. We've had the long-established Niagara Wine Route, which is going through downtown St. Catharines, and Henry Pelham has been a fixture on the wine route for many, many, many years, and one of the founders of the wine route. So it really does point to the growth of a sector in our community. It is the wine and beer sector, along with local food. It's creating that economic opportunity, and that's what's making our community, St. Catharines, unique. So I want to thank Paul for being on the show. John, thank you for your investment in downtown St. Catharines and for opening up on St. Paul Street. You're part of the vanguard of where we're going as a community, and we really do appreciate that. And folks, I want you to check out Henry Pelham when you get a chance. Throughout the year, they're open for tours, they're open for tastings. Stop by Plan B, so get an opportunity to see what John and his team are doing there, and really get out, experience all that our community has to offer, and make sure you capture it on your iPhones, your tablets, and post it to Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and use the hashtag OurHomeSTC as we continue to build a photo bank of our community. And it really does show how beautiful our community is and how proud we are of our community. So until the next time, keep using the hashtag and get out there and explore all that our community has to offer. Take care.